Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Taylor, and I'm a marketing intern at Yohocare. So, a little bit more about Yohocare. We are aiming to build an intuitive and interactive platform that fosters close relationships and improves health. We really want to help senior citizens stay engaged, fit, and sharp. Through Yoho Talk, we really hope to bring in inspiring speakers to talk on various important topics. Before we begin, we would really like to thank our partners, Sunnyvale Aging 2.0 Chapter, Elder Love, Los Gatos Saratoga Community Education Center, and the City of Sunnyvale Senior Center. We really appreciate your help in making Yoho Talk a success. Just a quick note, if you would like to partner up with us, please fill out the form at our website at yohocare.com/about/partners. There are a lot of perks to partner up with us, and it is completely free. Some of these benefits include access to monthly Yoho Talks just like this one, free techniques to improve the daily lives of your people in the organization, increased visibility and publication of your organization, and access to networking opportunities. All of this information and the form to partner up with us is available on our website at yohocare.com. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker for today, Dr. Patty Simone. Professor Simone is a trained experimental psychologist and has worked at Santa Clara University since 1993, where her role as a faculty member emphasizes teaching and scholarship. Her research on neurocognitive development over the lifespan examines environmental and other factors that influence attention and memory in children, undergraduate students, and healthy older adults. She has over 20 publications in this field, nearly half with SCU undergraduate student co-authors. After the presentation, we will have a Q&A session, so please feel free to leave any of your questions down in the comment section below. Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Patty Simone.
Thank you for that introduction, Taylor. Let me share my screen. So I'm happy to be here today to talk with you and others about improving memory at any age. So I want to thank Yohocare for inviting me here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this with anyone who might be interested in improving their memory. So as I promised, the main takeaways from this talk will be, I'll talk about what is normal, normal age-related memory loss or change, what factors contribute to memory loss, and what can you do to improve your memory. So you should walk away with that information. I'll make sure at the end to recap. I wanted to start with a case study. This is a man, 93-year-old male, fell down, broke a hip and an elbow. He was in the hospital for 5 days, and after 5 days was transported to a rehab facility where he was given a cognitive assessment by a speech therapist. The assessment involved questions on a task called this, it's known as the SLUMS, the St. Louis University Mental Status Examination. And questions like this are something like orientation to the time of day and where they are. So day of the week, year, state. A word problem is given, a minor mathematical problem, being asked to recall 5 items that were repeated earlier. There are a total of 11 questions, and it comes to about 30 points. So in this case, the person was determined to be borderline, have dementia, borderline dementia case. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too, what might have contributed to this person's rapid decline, because the family reported that he did not have dementia going into this. All right. Well, but first, since it's a talk about memory, I have to give you some type of a memory test, of course. So let's start with this. I'm going to read a list of words, and I'm going to ask you a little bit later to repeat them. You can, or not repeat them, but to recall them. And you can go ahead and write them down after I'm done, or just keep them in your head. If you write them down as I'm saying them, that's more of an auditory test, not a memory test. So we have to wait until I'm done reading. Okay, so I'm going to read the words. Here we go. Bed, quilt, dark, silence, fatigue, clock, snoring, night, toss, tired, night, artichoke, turn, night, rest, dream, snooze, slumber. Okay, you can, if you have a pencil handy, go ahead right now and you can jot a few of those down. Otherwise, don't worry about it if you don't have a pencil, because we'll come back to that in a little while. All right, I wanted to give you an idea of how we understand how memory works, because it helps to know how memory works in order to maximize your memory. So, we're taking in information from the environment, and we first bring it into an area called working memory. We do that through attention. So we pay attention to something, and that pulls it into our working memory, which is really our conscious thought. It's what's going on right now, what you're thinking about right now. So that's our working memory. If you want a longer form of that memory, if you want it to last a little bit longer, then it's transferred into something called long-term memory. So we'll call that learning. If you really learn something, then it's in your long-term memory and you can remember it later, bring it back into your working memory and think about it. So we're going to talk about this whole process today. We will spend a bit of time just talking about the mechanics of how memory works. I think that you'll appreciate your memory a bit more, as a matter of fact. Okay, so some common causes of forgetting. One of them is attention, which was part of that model I just talked to you about. Okay, so attention is something that we don't usually give a whole lot of attention to. Sorry for the pun, but we don't usually think about it as an important part of our memory process. But let me demonstrate that to you, the importance of attention. Now, sometimes attention is really easy, right? If I asked you on this screen, pick out all of the red A's, right? That's pretty easy. They pop out at you, right? So sometimes things grab our attention. We don't even have to try. But other times, the world looks a lot like this. And if I asked you to find Waldo, if you remember this, if I asked you to find Waldo, it takes a lot. You have to search, you have to extract, you have to put together, and it's really busy. Okay, so here's an example, which is more like our real life, of what our attention is asked to do. Oops, I meant to show you Waldo. There he is. There's Waldo right there, in case you were wondering. Okay, so it's usually taxing when we're searching and paying attention. But sometimes when we pay attention, and again, sometimes we might be paying attention, but not to the same thing. So for instance, if you look at the image on the left, right here, we have, what do you see? What do you see? Do you see a profile of a face? Do you see, or do you see any letters there? Do you see a word? All right, if you're focusing on the white as the figure, you probably see that as a face, with these being the glasses or the eyes and the nose, the mouth and chin and the neck. But if you think of the white as being the figure here, then this would be the letter L, and it's tilted a little bit, and then an I and an A and an R, the word liar. Okay, so it depends on if you're looking at the black as the figure or the white as the figure, what you see there, all right, is what you pay attention to. Similar here, if you look as the white as the figure, and that's a shadow on her face, you probably see the profile of a woman. But if you look at the black as the figure, then you probably see the profile of the body of a man playing a saxophone. Okay, it really depends on where we focus our attention. So here was a study that was published just a few years ago, actually. Well, I think 2011, in Psychological Science. They gave this chest scan to radiologists, 24 radiologists, and they asked them to scan this scan to look for any abnormalities. Now, these are trained professionals who look for tumors and masses and gross, cell growth in scans all the time. And they gave this to 24 radiologists, and they had them actually wear, they were able to monitor where their eyes were looking. And what they found was that of the 24 radiologists, only 4 noticed the abnormality that's present in this scan. And which is really hard to believe because it's a very unusual mass, and I'll point it out to you right here. Okay. It is literally a miniature gorilla that they put in this scan. Now, of the 20 who missed this gorilla in this scan, is it because they just didn't pay attention to it? Well, if looking at the eye movement, they looked right at it. So they looked right at this gorilla, this image of a gorilla, but they weren't expecting to see it. And so they didn't see it. Okay. They didn't register that it was there. All right. So that's, again, showing a failure of attention. But how about this? All right. The US penny, you've seen it before, right? But would you bet me a lot of money that you could identify which of these is actually an accurate US penny? Take a look at them. They're all very similar. They have kind of, it's copper, it's Lincoln on there, but what about the rest of it, right? And the point I'm trying to make with this is, again, so a penny is something that we've paid attention to. We know what a penny looks like. We can recognize a penny from afar, but we've never really actually paid attention to all of the minute details. And we've never stored it. We don't have an image of a penny in our brain anywhere. The way memories are stored actually is, rather than, like a documentation of like a video camera or a recording, it's actually as almost you put information in a blender with the lid off and hit it on the last button. So things go flying everywhere in the brain. And it's really more how memory works. So, by the way, the answer is A. This is what a penny actually looks like. Okay, so back to our model here. We've talked about attention, and hopefully I've pointed out to you that failures in attention can really then later impact memory. What we often think of as memory failures could really just have been a failure of attention. Okay. What we're going to talk about next, though, are usually what we think of memory is what's happening in our long-term memory. Oftentimes we'll find we're having a hard time learning new things, or we're having a hard time pulling out old information. So we'll talk about that next. What's going on here, and why is learning so difficult, and why is remembering so difficult? So to remind you, we talked about attention, and essentially what's happening is that information isn't really even learned in the first place if it's a failure of attention as a common cause of forgetting. And the other is more related to effort. It's not learned well, right? So it wasn't brought in, it wasn't learned and put in long-term memory at a level so that the person would be able to recall it later. So I want to really emphasize the point here that learning is an active process. Memory is an active process. It can happen passively, but for most of the time, if you really want to remember something, you should make it an active process. So when we're learning new information, it helps to do a couple of different things. One is to make connections with what you know. So I think of them almost as anchor points. You want to be able to anchor the incoming information with something you already know. I also like the visual of the magnet. The more you know, the easier it is to learn new things because you're able to create these anchor points and to attach it with what you know. If you think of, do you know someone who has, they tell you their birth date and you happen to remember it so easily, but not because, they're probably a very special person to you, but it also can be because they are, it's the same birth date that's of other, maybe it's, your wedding anniversary or an important date to you. It's a lot easier to remember something about someone else if it connects with you, if it connects with you personally or just connects with something that you know. So making those connections, again, that's showing learning as an active process. That's an easier way to learn information. Another way to help you really learn and remember information is to practice retrieving that information. So if you meet somebody new, have you ever had this happen where you meet someone new, you reach out, you shake their hands? Back in the day when we were doing that, you shake their hands and you say their name out loud again. Okay. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but sometimes about 5 minutes later, I'll be in the same conversation and I have no idea what that person's name is. Even though I introduced myself, I said their name out loud. I didn't really encode it well. I didn't learn it well, and now I can't recall it. So the best bet, what you should do in that environment, or you should do in that situation, is to ask the person their name again right then. And then later in the day, well after they're out of your sight, you should practice, you should rehearse their name. What was their name? Bring up an image of their face and their name and practice that repeatedly. Okay, it's not easy. It takes active processing. So, common causes of forgetting. 1, it could be attention. It wasn't learned in the first place. 2, it could be effort. It just wasn't learned well. So I encourage you to make connections with what you know, and I encourage you to practice recalling the information as well. That'll help make it so that forgetting doesn't happen. So speaking of forgetting, that list I gave you earlier before we did the penny, it's easy to remember things that surprise you. So if you think of it, what was on that list that was kind of unexpected? And you might be thinking, artichoke. Yeah, it was surprising. It was unlike all the other words. And so that's more memorable. Yeah, you didn't have to try very hard to remember that one. How about what's important to you? Now, sometimes, again, things can be important to you because of a connection that you have, or it could be important to you because it's repeated. Sometimes repetition helps us identify things that are important to us. And if you recall on that list of words, there's one word I repeated 3 times that might have been more memorable to you. And that word was night. Okay. So it's not necessarily easier to remember, but of course you need to attend to, you need to pay attention in the first place in order to remember anything. Hopefully that's come across. And so at the time when I was reading that list out loud, you were attending to the list. Okay, great. But I just want to remind you that, remember that sometimes we miss a lot. So not only we're worried about forgetting, but sometimes we didn't even see things in the process. I promise you, I had no gorilla in that list, but I just wanted to remind you that we really do miss a lot. And it's okay, that's normal, everybody does. If radiologists can miss a gorilla in a chest scan, we can forgive ourselves for missing some things too. And then finally, it's easier to remember things that you connect to, like common word pairs or themes. And so, for example, common word pairs, if you remember one of the word pairs, it's easy to get the other one. And in that list, there was toss and turn. Okay, so that is a little bit easier to remember that because that goes together. It's easy to remember those two. But speaking of themes, I want to give you a warning. If you're thinking back to that list, and if you remember the word sleep on that list, to that I would say, no, I didn't say the word sleep. Okay, I show you my list. I did not say the word sleep, but oftentimes we do remember that word because it's just a shortcut that we make as we're learning new information. All of those words were sleep related. It made sense that sleep should have been on the list, but it wasn't on the list. Okay, so sometimes, I know we're often worried about forgetting, but sometimes we happen to remember things that didn't actually happen at all. All right, so just a true or false question. Let's do an assessment here. In any day, do you think we remember more than we forget? I mean, that's a tough one. We seem, well, it's hard to remember what you forget, right? Because we've forgotten it. But a lot of things go through our day and we are going to forget them. So I would say that we probably do forget more than we remember. But we don't usually think about memory until it fails us, right? It's a lot like digestion. It's when we're trying to recall a name of somebody or trying to think of something that we've, walked into a room and we can't remember what we went there for. And which does happen. It happens to us at all ages, but we tend to give it more credibility when we're older and be more alarmed by it. But I do want to stress that forgetting is normal, okay, at every age. All right, back to that case study. There are factors that negatively impact memory, and I will put age on there as one of them. As we get older, there are changes that happen in our brain that are going to make it harder to recall information. We're losing neurons in our brain with age, And that's unfortunate because it does make it harder, not impossible, but it does make it harder uh, to um, to learn something new. But it's not impossible. It does have a negative impact on memory, and I'll show you in a little while that we still can mediate that and improve memory at any age. But other things that can impact memory are stress and sleep loss. So this case study, this person had just had major surgery because the hip was broken, was in the hospital for 5 days, certainly was undergoing stress and sleep loss. And another factor that can affect memory are medications. This person was certainly on narcotic analgesics for the pain, and that's something also that can affect memory. So I mentioned to you that the family did not agree with the assessment that this person was borderline dementia. And the reason I know so much about this case is because that person is my dad, who 2 years ago broke his hip. This is him just a couple of weeks ago. He's out here in the pandemic with me, riding out the pandemic in California, and he's doing fine. He did not have dementia then, doesn't have dementia now, but it was those other factors that affected his ability to perform on that test. That and that he just didn't care about doing well on that test either. So I'm not denying that there are factors that can negatively affect memory as we get older, age being one of them. But I do have some tips on how to improve memory. But I did want to show you too, and this is from the AARP. So here's a list of common drugs that many people take that all can have a negative impact on memory. So definitely be careful and just be aware of that as a potential cause for impacting memory. All right, so now finally on to tips to improve memory. And for this, I want you to remember 3 E's, okay? Effort that we've already talked about. Don't passively try and think, don't think that memory should be passive, right? If you really want to remember something, you're going to have to work at it, both bringing it in and then practicing it and then retrieving it as well. Okay, so effort. It's like any skill. Memory is just like any skill. If you practice, sometimes you get to an okay plateau. If you really want to get better at something, you have to give deliberate practice and work harder at it. But what happens to us with age is that gradually we have a loss of this skill, this memory. We have a loss of memory that starts in our 40s, really. And then we have to decide, are we okay with this new okay? We can be at this new plateau. Again, if this is without dementia, we can be at this new plateau, and that can be our new okay. And we can say things like, "Oh, it's just a senior moment." I would discourage you from using that as an excuse, and rather, I'd encourage you to engage in deliberate practice so that you can improve your memory. All right, so tips to improve memory. 1 is effort. I said there are 3 of these E's. The second one is engagement. And what I mean by engagement is engagement in the world around us, engagement with others. Just again, learning new things that makes it easier to learn new things, right? The more you have in your long-term memory, the easier it is to bring new things into long-term memory. So that type of engagement, book clubs, just conversations with other people can be helpful in improving memory as well. I'm sure that you're aware that social isolation that many people might be undergoing right now, especially during the pandemic, that's as bad for our health as a pack of cigarettes a day. Okay, so trying to stay engaged is not only good for our cognitive health, but it's good for our mental health and our physical health as well. So social engagement is very important. And then the third E, if you had a guess, what do you think it would be? We've got effort, engagement, and it's not a magic pill. That's not even an E, exercise. It's physical activity, so aerobic exercise. There's one study that came out in 2011 that showed that brisk walking for about 40 minutes 3 times a week actually increases the volume of the part of the brain that's important for memory and improve memory as well in older adults. So physical activity is also very important. I am not your medical doctor. I'm not a medical doctor at all, certainly not yours. So if you need to, talk to your doctor first before you engage in physical activity, please do that. But if you can, with your mask on, just walk outside, take a brisk walk a couple of days a week. I think that you'll find that that'll improve your memory as well. Okay, so what I promised, let's see if I've come through with that. The takeaways are, I said we would talk a little bit about what's normal age-related memory loss. And the difference really is, memory loss is normal. Memory loss at every age is normal, but it shouldn't interfere with daily living. So someone scoring close to dementia on the slum scale that I told you about would probably have trouble with dialing a telephone, going to the grocery store, managing their bills. It would interfere with daily living. And something I really want you to remember from here too is that forgetting is normal at all ages. Okay, so forgetting and memory loss aren't exactly the same thing, but actually they're pretty similar, and it's normal at all ages. What factors contribute to memory loss? Here I would say attention, effort, stress, sleep, medications, and age. And we have more control than we think. Okay. And then finally, what can you do to improve your memory? Those would be the 3 E's: effort, engagement, and exercise. So in closing, I'd like to thank Yohocare again for inviting me out today. It's a pleasure to be part of this organization. I love the mission of the program. Wish them great success. And if you're looking for further reading, I recommend these 3 books. Tell you a little bit more about some of the things that I talked about today. And that's it for my presentation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Simone. We really learned a lot about how to improve our memory. So we are moving on to the Q&A portion of the talk. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to put it down below in the chat and we will get to asking Dr. Simone about her answers. So a previously submitted question that we have for you is, once you have memory loss, will you be able to recover, or will the memory loss be more serious?
Yeah, it kind of depends. I think there's always an opportunity for recovery, no matter what was responsible for the memory loss. But again, it's not passive. It's like physical therapy. You have to really work at it. And I think we can actually. There have been studies with patients with Alzheimer's disease who have significant memory loss, but they're still able to improve their memory if they use a space retrieval technique. Which is, as I had mentioned in the talk, just kind of thinking about things or prompting them with to give the answer at a later time. So yeah, there's always room for improvement, but it's effortful. We have to work at it.
Right. That's really important, and that's kind of optimistic and great answer. So I know you mentioned this in your talk before. So you talked about exercises and how we can exercise to improve our memory, but is there any other type of exercise that you would recommend besides taking a brisk walk?
Um, I think what's beneficial about aerobic exercise is that it helps increase the blood flow to the brain, and we get more nutrients that we need to our brain. So I think that physical health is important. So aerobic exercise, more so than just stretching or core exercises, those are important too, especially to maintain our balance and be able to take those walks. But it's important to get our heart rate up. So for that, you pretty much need aerobic activity. But it's also important, what we eat will also be important in keeping our arteries open so we get good blood flow to the brain.
Okay, I'll definitely take that brisk walk today. So another pre-asked question that we have is, what is a good time to start working on improving memory?
Well, it's never too late to start, and it's never too early to start either. I think, I've talked to grammar school kids in the past, elementary school age kids, and tried to demonstrate that you want to have a kind of a mindset that this is pliable. Right? It's not set in stone. It's not genetically determined how well our memory works. And no matter what age you are, you can have a better memory. So I would say it's good to know that when you're young because it helps in academics. But I think it's good to know when you're older too, to realize that you have more control than you think.
Right, that's a great answer. So this next question is really interesting and it's something that I've always wondered about. So do you believe in a memory diet? And a memory diet is basically eating certain foods that will help improve your memory, or do you think this is more of a myth?
Yeah, I think that they change, the advice changes pretty frequently about what is the right food, what's the right diet to have. So I don't know that would feel comfortable recommending specific foods right now to improve memory. Um, yep. Except a healthy diet and a well-balanced diet, I think is more important than any particular nutrient. Yeah.
Right. A good diet is always the best solution.
Yeah.
So another question is, do you think memory loss can be genetic or is it genetic?
Memory loss, no, I don't know that that's genetic. As we age and like I was saying, we lose neurons in the brain, and especially in this part of the brain called the hippocampus, and that's related to memory formation and coding new memories. And that's normative. We lose about 1 to 2% of the volume a year. Uh, but physical activity again can increase it by about 2% a year. Um, but I haven't seen that it was specific to anyone's biology. That's kind of standard across all humans, as a matter of fact. So no, I don't think it's genetic. I think it has more to do with the environment than it does with our biology.
Well, thank you so much for answering these questions that we had for you today. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here and talk to us, because I know for sure that I learned a lot about improving your memory, and I really did enjoy those memory tests that you gave us today. And before we end, I would really like to thank everyone here taking the time out of their day to come and join us. And if you do want to learn more about Yohocare and Yoho Talk, please visit our website. On every second Wednesday of every month, Yohocare will host another Yoho Talk just like this one with an expert guest speaker. If you're interested in attending more events just like this one, please subscribe to our upcoming events reminders. And if you have subscribed, you will get, notifications to see which talk is coming up next so you can plan in advance. On the screen, you should see a QR code which leads directly to our website. So if you open up your camera app on your phone and you aim it directly at the QR code on the screen, you should see a button that directs you to our website. Finally, a gentle reminder that if you would like to partner up with us, please fill out the form on our website at yohocare.com/about/partners. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you at our next Yoho Talk next month. Have a great day.